Butler, here you go, thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ben's the only one that's not going to make it today. Any public comment on the agenda? Yes, ma'am.
It's May 6th, not April 6th.
I beg your pardon. Thank you for pointing that out, Coach, for us.
Didn't I say Mace? Didn't I say Mace?
No, it's on the agenda.
It's on the-
Oh,
Sorry.
the agenda's wrong. Oh.
Just point of
I thought I
order.
said May 6th, but I got, you know.
You're good. The agenda's wrong, so I just point of order wrong. Thank you.
Anybody else? Wayne?
Yeah, I'd like to just stay with the E code 360, because they know what they're doing. And you do not, if you don't change the ordinance, you just keep, you just enforce the ordinances you have, you don't have any problem. I got pictures of what it's like to have a building changed, if you'd like to look at it.
Will you be discussing this?
What?
No, we're not discussing your situation.
No.
We're-
Will you be discussing?
Just on what we have tonight, what's on there
The
now, that's it.
ordinance.
That's
Before
it.
you, no, I'm asking, will you be discussing it or just voting?
We'll be discussing it.
Okay.
And then if we decide to make a recommendation, we'll
Right.
do that and make recommendation to the supervisors.
Right.
That's
Okay, there's buildings right next to my house. Cows everywhere. I don't think you should change anything. Yep, there we got flies. I got everything there. And if you go changing and they can put more buildings and it gets just goofy.
Well, you're in an A1, aren't you, area?
I'm in a B1.
You're a B1?
All right, I got B1 and A1.
Behind.
See how it is? This is my property across the road.
Well, what we're talking about tonight is the RL district.
Well, it's the same deal. It's all,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is not relevant to what you're talking about tonight. This is not a farm, it's not a farm activity, and you're aware of his litigation that
No.
on this. Excuse me.
No, you're wrong though.
No, I'm not, I thank you.
The
You're-
litigation is done. Just let the man speak. This is
Okay.
pointing to the ordinance he wants to change.
What I'm pointing out to the board was this particular situation, and what you're looking at would have no application to, and it doesn't have any relevance to the amendments that you're discussing.
you're gonna change all the buildings and stuff.
Okay.
You can't.
What he's experiencing, Tom, is what this ordinance, or what you're considering, you're trying to avoid.
I beg to differ, but I'm not gonna talk about his individual situation.
Well,
You'll be in this situation if you don't.
Yeah,
everybody's
everybody's in that situation.
I propose you go through your agenda, and then when you get to that point, discuss what it is and tell the public what the proposed changes may look like. And then we can have a discussion. I think that's probably the way to do it, because you still have to, if we're still in public comment, just follow the
Yeah,
agenda.
the public
that
comment
gives
was just on was in the agenda for right now.
you- Right. But I think he's trying to bring this up, that he'd like a discussion as well as the Simmons on what's proposed.
Okay, approval of minutes, we don't have any minutes to approve yet, they haven't been printed out, so we're a couple months behind.
Yeah, Cassie we're trying
She's
to work
doing it.
to
Okay.
catch you guys up with this.
Old new business, proposed zoning ordinance amendments, farm structures, conditional review and discussion about proposed amendments to the accessory use table and principal land use table to allow non-traditional scale and traditional scale farm structures as an accessory use subordinate to agricultural ag business use, and and as permitted principal use as part of the agricultural use in the A1, RH, RL, MU, and B1 zoning district, where agriculture is already allowed as a permitted use. That's what we're going to be discussing.
So what does that look like then, I think is the question.
Well, the way that we have it now is the building, the sheltering can't be any closer to 85 feet to a structure,
So,
or from any street line or property line. And then 300 feet from a building
In the A1 district.
in which zone?
in the agricultural district.
Okay, just in ag.
But no, that is also in the RL, it is also in the RL district also.
Well, it actually, farm structures, in the current ordinance right now as it stands, farm structures of traditional and non-traditional scale are not permitted.
Not permitted, right,
In
that's,
RL,
right, that's
RH,
right, but that's.
all the non-A1 districts, except for M.
And if I might, maybe I can help bring David up to speed and put it in context too. And you're correct. As the ordinance stands right now, there's a principal use chart and then there's an accessory use chart. On our principal land use table, you're allowed to have agribusiness and agriculture in the A zone, A1 zone, and in the RL zone, and in the RLH zone, and every zone except the manufacturing zone. On the accessory use table, and again, this has to do with farm structures on farms. So you're allowed to have a farm in the A1 and the RL, but on our accessory use table, it shows, as it stands right now, that you're allowed to have non-traditional or traditional scale of barn on a farm in the agricultural zone, but in the RL zone, even though you're allowed to have a farm or do agricultural activity and agribusiness, you're not allowed to have, the box is not checked for allowing for farm structures on there. We believe that was inadvertent, and the reason why we were discussing the topic in the first place was to see whether the board agreed to recommend whether or not that should be corrected as a legislative error. Because as it stands right now, you can have a farm, you can't have a barn. Okay. Supplemental to that, and expanding on that topic of discussion, is the idea of what should there be any thought to looking at changing the setbacks as they regard to barns and structures. We have supplemental regulations. Forget about where you're allowed to have it, whether it's in the A zone or in the R zone. So just even in the agricultural zone, where clearly full-scale agriculture is allowed. It's always been the case and remains the case that there's generic setbacks and then there's enhanced setbacks. So we've always required in the agricultural zone in our supplemental rules that there's kind of setbacks for two things. One, for manure storage, it has to be 200 feet from a property line. That's kind of standard, and you see that, and that's always been the case. And then secondly, if you had a barn or an agricultural building that was used for things other than keeping animals in them, whether it's chickens, cows, whatever the case may be, they had what I would call an enhanced setback, because you could put a generic building maybe 20 feet back from your border, okay, or the street, on the generic setbacks for just a general building. But for something that you were going to keep animals in, we require, and we still require, that any building that's going to house livestock, poultry, be located at least 85 feet from a street line or property line, or 300 feet from any adjacent landowner's dwelling,
Right on, 300 feet.
Whichever one's greater. So I do believe, and Mrs. Simmons, she actually has, and I gave you copies of too, she has recommendations that perhaps there be consideration given to increasing the amounts of setbacks for barns that are holding livestock.
I'd be happy to speak to those whenever you're ready. I can.
Yeah, I would, and that's kind of a fair summary of what we're talking about. A, whether and again, it's my humble opinion that that was a mistake, that we failed to check its box on that. And secondly, and the courts back this up, in an agricultural operation, an active farm, the courts have actually held that the concept that a barn is accessory, it's really not an accessory structure on a farm. In fact, the judge said, if anything, it's the house that's accessory to the barn. So whether you had a 10-acre plus plot or you were farming on farmland that is an open field, just like if you were in a warehousing zone and you put a warehouse on a piece of land to do that business, the courts have kind of said, reasoned out that, well, in a farming operation, it's really not accurate to call a barn an accessory building. It's a principal building.
Well, that's how you
So-
have it in your ordinance, though, you have it as an accessory.
I understand that, and
That's
that's,
how it's in your ordinance.
I understand that.
Okay.
And
Well, I don't
again,
know that that's a good
and-
argument for this, then.
well, it's a legislative argument because I do believe that we didn't have that definition. We came in with consultants, they updated our ordinance and we added some definitions. They added that definition and I don't think any thought was put into that, whether accessory or not. And frankly, accessory uses, whether or not they're in an ordinance or not, accessory uses are things that are customarily found with and subordinate to the principal use on a piece of land. So in a residential area, your shed, your pool, your swing set, those are accessory to a house. You don't have to specifically say they're allowed. Things that are implicitly allowed and accepted to be customary with the principal use are considered to be an incidental use. It was during the course of reviewing this, and after we were in this process, that I came upon the Commonwealth Court case where the judge happened to point out in a similar context that it's really not accurate to call a barn an accessory use on a farm because of the reasons I just said. It's not subordinate to. It is actually part of the principal use of farming is to have a barn. So it was because of that reasoning that I had recommended that you consider actually adding barns as accessory uses on farms and also as a principal use on a farm property.
What zones are farming?
Allowed in
Allowed.
everything but the industrial.
M1, yeah,
And then-
everything's different.
And then what constitutes a farm? Like, how many acres is a farm?
I do believe it was a 10-acre minimum in the ordinance. There could be non-conforming ones, but I believe there's a 10-acre.
10.
It could be 3 right next to your house.
It can, and again, yeah,
Okay.
it can.
Why don't you follow the,
Okay.
Do you want me to walk you?
Yeah, please.
So.
I'm sorry, I'm not the chair. I know we talk formally, but.
Go ahead, you can talk.
Okay, so this sheet that you all have in front of you are just some, the proposal that we have. So currently, as Mr. McDermott said, right now, as the ordinance stands, the only district where you are currently allowed to have farm structures is the A1 district. And you're proposing, as I understand it, to just change that to any district where agriculture is allowed, we're gonna allow these farm structures. And furthermore, further delineation here, the farm structures specifically that we're talking about on this piece of paper are farm structures that are going to be housing animals. And your current ordinance has in the A1 district that 300 feet, the setback, enhanced setback, 300 feet from any adjacent landowner's dwelling and 85 feet from any property line, just for these farm structures that house animals in the A1 district. That's what's currently allowed. With your proposal to allow that in all of the districts except for M1, what we're recommending is, yes, allow that, but have a further enhanced setback in these districts that are not A1. So if you look at that zoning map up there, everywhere where it's green, we're keeping the current ordinance as it is, And in these other districts, the yellow at the top of the map, some of the red there, in these places where the primary goals of these zoning districts are not agriculture, for example, the goal of the RL district is to promote the development of single-family dwellings.
This might help.
There we go, yeah, that's
Sorry,
no, that's the color code,
These are
yeah.
the zones.
Right.
So she's talking about what is used in according
Right,
to
so
the
in the
map.
They're
RL
aware of what
suburban,
their zones are.
so in the RL suburban zone, the purpose of that is, this is right out of the ordinance, is to encourage low-density, single-family developments at moderate densities in locations in the township where utilities and transportation facilities exist or are anticipated in the future. So we've kind of earmarked this area for residential development. What we're saying is, allow these farm structures, okay, but let's put some enhanced setbacks in place so that these farm structures that might house 3,000 chickens, 5,000 hogs, 150 head of cattle, there's a little more separation from neighboring properties, from neighboring homes, than in the A1 district where it's much more, where
It's
of
farm
course
up
it's
against
farm
farm.
up against farm up against farm, and likely it's going to stay that way. But in these areas, RL, definitely RH, potentially B1, these other districts where there are businesses, there are homes at high density, at low density, let's not put 5,000 animals in a barn right up against these homes or areas where these homes are likely to come. Let's have some enhanced setbacks. And on that sheet, you can see what those proposed setbacks are. It's nothing crazy, but it's just for farm structures housing animals. We're saying let's leave 300 feet from any street line or property line for these farm structures, so that there's a little more separation between not only maybe a neighboring home, but if you think about, you drive just on my way here, I saw a lot of parcels that are maybe 2 acres with a house right in the middle. And if you do these setbacks from the property line instead of the nearest neighbor's home, you're protecting the resident's yard as well. In my yard, I have my kids' swing set. My neighbor has a swimming pool. And you're protecting those areas from being right up against these 3,000 whatever chickens or 300 hogs versus than just the actual setback from the home. And then we also have a little thing, if there's a property where there's no spot on a parcel that meets that 300 feet from a property line for a building, maybe because it's an odd-shaped parcel or the parcel just isn't big enough to accommodate a 300-foot setback, or the shape. We have an exception that says, okay, you can't meet that 300-foot setback, then pick the spot on the property that's farthest from an adjacent landowner's dwelling to put that barn with animals. As long as it's at least 100 feet from the property line and 400 feet from an adjacent landowner's dwelling. And I think what this is allowing for is expanded agricultural uses in these districts where farm structures were not allowed, currently they're not allowed. And so we're allowing for those while still protecting against the negative impacts that these structures with animals could have on nearby homes and residential areas in these residential districts, these business districts that aren't really set up to accommodate, thousands of animals, hundreds of animals in close proximity to neighbors, businesses, etc. And another caveat, this is not going to take away any rights from people who are currently doing these activities in these districts. So correct me if I'm wrong, they'll be grandfathered into whatever, the ordinances were at the time that they started.
You mean if there's an existing structure?
If there was an
already in
existing,
place?
yes, that they're currently using it. So it's not like you guys are going to be going out saying, oh, hey, these 500 whatever rabbits that you have in this barn, you're going to have to get rid of them because it doesn't meet this new.
No, but if they wanted to put a new
They'll be
building in, it would
grandfathered.
be
This would
subject
be new, right?
to
New
this.
operations, new buildings, yes.
Just to understand the first sentence of your thing.
Yeah.
Aside from the 400, kind of the second sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So, in essence, the proposed amendment would be simply to zap the 85, because right now as it stands, it's 85 or 300, whatever is
300
greater.
from the
You're
nearest
saying just
dwelling.
cut out the 85 or and make it a straight
300 from the property
300.
line, from the property line, not from the nearest dwelling. Yes, correct.
Right,
Yes.
okay.
Right. And then, and you could just end it there. Basically, the rest of that paragraph, the whole second sentence, is only for if the property cannot accommodate that 300-foot setback. Because if it's an odd, if you have like a really long, narrow parcel that can't, that isn't even 300 feet wide, something like that. So it's just a slightly enhanced setback for non-A1 district.
Can that be done that way? Because that's what I was thinking, like where she was saying that if you get a lot of parcels, or we do a lot of 10-acre parcels, because it's a cleaning grade.
Right.
So if you have a lot of 10-acre parcels and you're saying 300 feet this way and they're narrow or whatever, and there's no way for them to do something, but yeah, can we do that with?
Yeah, and
hearings?
and we
You have to have a
can,
zoning hearing on that to change that for that parcel.
right, and you don't want to create something where you have to go get variances and stuff.
Right,
out of the
right.
gates. And we don't have to act, you don't have to act on this tonight, you can digest it and play it around. There's no urgency to this, and especially with David being new and Ben not being here. That's certainly, that's something that you consider. Just out of curiosity, just on, I'm just thinking out loud as to, I think the idea behind maybe the 85, is there a need? Suppose there is no, because 300 can be a significant setback if there's no
Depending on the
countervailing
shape of the
measure.
property.
Does it need to be do these structures need to be 300 feet from the road per se? Or
So-
from a border per se? Because I appreciate if you're saying ag to ag, no problem, right?
Yeah.
It's the ag to residential that causes
Right.
the tension,
But
right?
is this-
If I can, is there a reason, and I'm not asking for like a quiz answer, but
Yeah.
thought to be, is there a reason why there needs to be 300 from a road per se when there's no really kind of issue per se just with road?
So I guess a couple reasons, and yes,
Yeah.
we've thought about this, we've thought about it again. 300 feet from the road or the property line versus a measurement from the nearest house, which is how you currently, have it. A couple of reasons. One, we're talking about this area like RL, RH, where more houses are going to be built in the future. The point of this is to encourage the purpose of the zone is to encourage single-family dwellings at low density for RL, higher density at RH. So obviously this is coming. These are areas of the township where, hey, we're going to probably have either have sewers or they're coming. And so it's a protection for, future landowners, I would say. If the setback is from the street or property line, that's not changing. It's a fixed point. Future homes, we don't know where they're going to be. If a parcel sells and you get, 5 new homes, they could be much closer to the farm structure than potentially the 300 feet was before. 2, my point about the yard. So a lot of times, like when I think about my yard and my home, 300 feet from my home is a certain distance away. My yard is larger, right? It's an acre, it's 2 acres in the RL district. I have my kids' swing sets in my yard. I have, I don't have a swimming pool, but I hope to have one day in my yard. I have, my kids playing basketball. So I want that area in the RL district where I'm having my kids when they're out playing in the yard. I want that setback for them as well. And if you do the setback just from the home, your yard could be much closer to that farm structure on the neighbor than if you do the setback from the street line. Again, the street line isn't going to change. So I think that's the protection of having it from the property line versus a neighbor.
Now, most residential accessory uses aren't allowed in the front yard, so you're not going to have a pool. Most of the time, you're going to have like your swing sets and sheds. Those are usually confined in the side and rear yards.
But when you think about, I'm just thinking about parcels next to my parents. Those are the setbacks that we're worried about. Is like the side,
Right.
not necessarily the front, the rear. I'm thinking of your neighbor across the street. It's the rear setback that he's concerned about, or the side, not necessarily.
Right.
Because the way the houses sit next to the road,
They
the
jut
parcel-
into the bigger parcel.
It's not necessarily just a front
Right.
setback that you would have to be concerned about.
Tom,
Anybody else have anything?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, is this considered are you viewing this as a permitted use or conditional use?
Permitted, sure.
The
Right now, they're listed in our chart as an accessory structure. Like I said, I believe, and frankly, I think a farmer's lawyer could come in here and argue a barn on a farm is not, and there's a case law in the Commonwealth Court on it, that a barn on a farm is not an accessory structure. It's a primary structure. So, but that's a separate apart from setbacks and all that sort of thing. To me, they're kind of two independent topics of how they're categorized and what their setbacks should be. Because functioning on the ground and impact on people's life, it's the same, whether it's accessory, primary, etc.
Kathy, do you have anything?
No.
Dave, as a new member, do you have any questions?
I'm okay.
Jack,
No.
you got chickens on your farm.
How about my situation?
Excuse me?
How about my situation? 300 feet,
Wayne, we can't, we would love to do something, but we can't. It's,
why not?
we're an advisory board. That's all we are. We have
I'll
nothing to
get
do
you
with
the
it.
paperwork, you can probably look for, you'd be more than advisory.
Well, I think what he's could benefit from is to avoid something like that. I think that's kind of what Bethany's talking about too with the.
Well, we understand that, but there's nothing we can do. He had a legal case
Oh, no,
against
I
him.
understand that.
And
What I'm
that's
saying
something
is-
we don't want to get
And it
into.
did not result as, his situation didn't result because somebody said that's a farm or that's allowed or anything. There's a complex factual situation, it has nothing to do with somebody saying you can, that's a,
Well, I mean, but to your point about what a farm is. I
it's
mean,
not
these
a
are-
farm. His house is not a farm. In fact,
the
there's a history
neighbor's
behind that.
I'm
There was
aware of that.
alpacas on it before.
It's irrelevant.
It is. That's what my point is.
The ordinances are the ordinance, and to what he's been trying to point out, like the ordinances as they exist, it's not a farm. So how are the cows there? How are the alpacas there? It's not a farm, and your setbacks aren't being abided by.
Again, that's.
So.
And again, I was happy to talk to you outside about the whole history of that.
Well, I think
but it's
you-
not.
That has nothing to do, that's just it.
Has nothing to do with what?
We're trying to resolve some of that.
That was my point, is that this
But-
is an issue that.
But he has an
you-
issue, but what we resolve now is not going to satisfy him. It's not going to help him.
Well, I think part of the problem is that.
And we
it's-
understand his situation, okay? And
And what? Because,
we don't, I know Wayne has a real bad issue with the township about what happened. But that have nothing to do with us right now. We're
I
trying to,
understand what you're saying, and I agree. I'm trying to encourage you to, this is why I asked for permitted use, conditional use, because if something may be affecting a neighbor, then you would want the neighbor to be able to have a say. And you can't do that if you go with permitted use. I know the argument of a structure and it's a farm and you need a structure, but again, let's be very clear where you're going to allow this. Encourage the setbacks and look at your
if you have farm property and you want to have animals, you can have a barn. You should be able to have a barn for your animals.
Depends on the size and the zone. That's why
Why is-
zoning's really important.
But we allow agriculture in all our districts,
Well, that's
except
what-
for the industrial.
And again, I can tell you that in this, it was not always the case that this was the case. It was silent on it, and I believe it was a legislative error that we introduced the whole topic and caused it to occur in the first place.
But I will also say back, and we have the whole history of the zoning, previous to this recent zoning update, which I think happened in 2018, previous to that, no agriculture was allowed
in the
in the
residential.
RL district.
None.
Actually,
Right.
none. Zero.
None.
But the
And it stood that way for years. I think 2006 to 2018.
Yeah.
There was actually, and I think this actually kind of speaks to a little bit more of what we're saying. Actually, zero agriculture was allowed in RL from 2006 to 2018. And then in 2018, you said, okay, maybe that was a little too harsh. Let's allow some agriculture back into the RL and the RH and the B1 and the MU districts. And that's what you did, but you said, hey, let's maybe not have farm structures, but let's allow hay and things like that. So that's why, I mean, I think,
Right.
just to say that it was an error, I don't know,
No, no,
I don't know
well,
what it was.
I
because
will
think-
correct, I was here at the time during the
Yeah,
review. You
yeah.
could look at all the planning commission meetings, you could look at public hearings on it. At no time did anybody say, hey, this, I don't believe this was a purposeful decision. There was no thought given to, you know what, let's allow ag, but not allow barns. That was not, I can assure you, what happened.
But
But
Tom,
that's-
Tom, can I say something?
Yes.
When you're encouraging residential in an RL or the RH,
Which you are, because you're, I mean.
But not solely.
Not,
Not solely,
not,
but that's-
And it doesn't predominate.
Can I speak?
Yeah. Please.
Because I haven't said a whole lot.
Please, go ahead.
When you're encouraging that, it doesn't go against what you're trying to do to enhance those setbacks. Because where we came from in Peters, it's ongoing, and you get into all kinds of nuisances.
issues like
pesticides,
weeds.
you get into, so those setbacks will help, at least with the
No,
building.
we appreciate it.
At least with and honestly, the buildings that house the animals are primarily the biggest concern. Ag, you can have some concerns with an ag building that don't house animals, but it's more congruous
Sure.
with residential. But the housing animals, and I'm not trying to restrict anyone, because I don't like restrictions at all.
No.
But when you have residential and agriculture in the same, it's wise to enhance those setbacks.
Any other comments? Kathy?
And I beg your
Go
pardon.
ahead.
And I can get you to, and I've been doing around, there's a, I've doing a little sampling, and I was away actually after, for the last 10 days. And I've been reviewing, we can get you some, samples of what's predominant, what's common throughout the state. 300 is pretty common on, manure setbacks. You see the 300 setback is pretty commonly employed. There's a recommendation here that you consider enhancing and tweaking that, and certainly something to think about. And I'll see if I can find other examples of that as well. I
Specifically
will say-
in residential districts, could you look at?
In residential.
Yeah,
Because that's what
and
we're
again, a lot,
talking
yeah, and it,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hit or miss. And even in some agricultural areas, they don't, they do restrict even ag to different zones. That's not what we do here. But where agriculture is allowed, and different, I think we're different developmentally than Peters as well. We're not on some trajectory to become a suburbanized or similar, in that vein. And I will say, and I don't mean to be adversarial or debate squad or anything like that. When you look at the purpose sections of those ordinances, they don't predominate over the specific expressly allowed uses in that district. Because clearly, and that purpose statement, it's general. It's not. It doesn't put residential over. And on the history of that, and the folks here know, there was kind of, what happened was that zone up here, that's the RL zone, that used to be A1. And then it was changed maybe to R2, what I understand, and that was before my time, to accommodate Cherry Valley Estates. And that was deemed to be kind of an overcorrection. So they came back in the middle and made it an RL. RLs are normally, you'll see them around, all your neighbors have, like up in North Fayette Township, a lot of them on the cusp between like the cities and the countries, you'll see where you have some RRs. And really, when RRs are introduced, or the light residential, that is not a statement that these are purposefully where we're trying to, predominate, encourage low-level residential over agricultural. To the contrary, most of those are introducing light residential as compatible with the existing ag.
But
I'm just saying the purpose statements don't.
I disagree. So right out of your ordinances, the RL suburban residential, the purpose of this district is to encourage low density, single family developments at moderate densities in locations in the township where utilities and transportation exist, or are intended.
That's right, but that's not to the exclusion of the ongoing allowance of the agricultural uses that pre-exist and
Right.
still allowed in the
That's
zone.
right.
And so,
Okay, well,
We're not
and I think that's what
excluding it.
we're not
See,
excluding it. We're saying
no.
let's allow it, but we're saying in these areas where the purpose is for residential, let's have some increased setbacks to protect the purpose of the
no,
district.
we're not disagreeing with each other.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that the purpose sections, that's not the exclusive section of purpose of that zone. And
It is the
frankly-
purpose, but
It is
it's
the
not
purpose.
everything that's allowed.
Right.
I
Why
understand.
you, right.
And I just want to say, you know, I think you made that RL district there because you recognize city water is already there. It's right by the town of Midway. You're looking into the future, knowing that there probably will be development and wherever you want to put it. You recognize that you want to keep the whole township, most of it agriculture, and that's what you're doing. But you're recognizing that this is probably where homes are going to be. And I think it's important to have ordinances that support the type of agriculture that's going to work well with the homes and where you want them to be. And quite frankly, we have a financial problem in this township, just like all the other townships do. We don't have enough money. The costs are going up all the time, and having some new homes here would not necessarily be a bad thing. I'm not saying, you know,
Turn us into
turn it
Peters.
into
We're not
Peters,
saying that
but
at
the
all.
fact of the matter is, if we don't increase the tax basis with some new homes and making places where there are at least some places that are appealing for people to live, then the alternative is to raise taxes for everyone else that's here. And so I think it's a good thing to have a small residential area where you're trying to promote residential living.
That area at one time was thought like that, because I was on the board back in the early 2000s, because of sewage that close.
Right.
That was even before they brought it up to Midway up there,
Yeah.
it was done that way. And as you notice, it hasn't gone any further than
Right.
Cherry Valley. The township has been trying to get sewers from the early 2000s. The cost of that goes up every year, it's up into $30-some million. They can't get the money. Nobody wants to lend that kind of money. Back in 2007, 2008, the projects that they had designed for this township was under $10 million. They couldn't get $10 million back in. Nobody wanted to lend the money to do these projects. So that's why a law that was developed that way, hoping that stuff would have went, but it hasn't gone through.
But I don't think that that's a reason to just say it's never going to happen. And I
Well,
think
no,
the
but
purpose of
it's
just
been,
the
what,
planning.
almost 24 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, whatever. There's possibilities of some sewers coming now, which are on the bright outlook, but it still is not here. You know, there's a lot of people that,
Right.
But the problem is retroactively making these changes is
It's much more
difficult, because a lot of
difficult.
times the problem's already there. So I think that's the purpose of planning commission, is to think
Yeah.
about this stuff now, to anticipate some of these
well,
changes.
that's why it was, some of that was changed, like you said, back in the
Yeah.
day, to accommodate some of that stuff. And you look, nobody can, I'm not a fortune teller, I don't know if anybody else is, but you don't know what's gonna happen.
Right.
Yours may go totally down where you're at, may totally turn the opposite and back up over here.
Yeah.
May everything turn this way, you know, for the better. So, you know, what do? You're just trying to make everybody happy, that's all we're trying to do.
Right, right.
We appreciate that.
We do appreciate
And we
that.
understand that. Thank you.
And if I understand, too, and any little intellectual equivalent aside, I think we're on the same page as far as, if I understand correctly, what your concept is, you're not opposed to there being big barn or small barn in the RL zone, you just want to enhance setback, and actually, you're okay with generic setbacks for buildings that don't have animals.
Yeah, we're specific.
So really, all we're talking, so really, you'd be okay with,
Farm
is-
structures with animals, just like you call it out and have the enhanced in A1,
Yes.
do a similar.
you'd be okay with checking both those boxes, and even whether it's primary, accessory, etc., in both those zones. However, under the supplemental it's really the supplemental regulations that you'd like to see, and I don't,
Enhance
that you're recommending that there be
Enhanced.
enhancements on even what's here now, and even if in the A1 zone, say we broke it into two sections, say they thought, maybe it's better in both places, but really the way, it's pretty standard in A zones to have that kind of the way it is right now.
Yeah.
But you'd like to see kind of in non-A1 zones,
Non-A1
let's look at
enhanced
increasing the
setbacks.
buffer
Yes.
between adjacent, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Just for farm structures
Yeah.
with housing animals, is
Yeah.
how you call it out now, yes.
yeah. And if you guys want to just play around with your pencils on, hey, what happens if you do this in different scenarios on this, or if there's other simple ways to achieve the same kind of buffering, but then I don't think people are going to quibble about 25 yards and 50 yards here and there as a functional matter, you know, whether if you guys want to look at whether you think the current's adequate or there's any tweaks along the lines that she suggested, which would be kind of increasing it from 3 to 4.
Just another thought, you're proposing that you want to allow farm structures of any size, which then could also mean in the residential districts having the really large structures with unlimited animals. And I'm just wondering, do you think that needs to be looked at?
I honestly, I'm just
Yeah.
curious as to your thoughts
Well,
on that.
because-
And I will tell you, I'm not sure where, and then frankly, if you do the square root of 25,000, I'm not sure why that was a cutoff between
Yeah.
big barn and little barn.
That's
And I think, I'm sorry, and not to throw the consult company under the bus, I think that was like a cut and paste from, I don't know, what, Nebraska?
We have,
You know,
and just to put it in context, like we
Because a
have,
5,000 square foot building is
that's what we
pretty,
have, and it's huge.
that's a
It's
big,
like if
you know,
take-
I've worked in a dairy farm, the milk house was way south of 25,000, they were milking 200 cows.
And that just doesn't seem congruent in like, especially the R.
RL.
I mean, I know we're in RL, but even the R, I mean, to me, the RH, it seems crazy to talk about allowing a 25,000.
Or big-
I don't know that, do you, and I take your thoughts on that, and
That just
everybody's
seems
too. Do we
crazy.
actually need a big barn and a little barn definition, or should we just
Just
basically deal, I mean, frankly, the farmer can decide how big his barn is. Setbacks are what protects other people's interests.
No.
This is
To
true.
a point.
To a
So
point,
only to
but-
a point. If you,
Or maybe put a cap on it, no barns bigger than 25,000 square feet. I mean, when you look at what is a 25,000 square foot space, it's huge. I mean, maybe in the A1, okay, but
Right.
I just, a 25,000 square foot barn allowed in a high density residential district or a low density
You mean you would be
residential.
opposed to one of your neighbors that's got some property down there putting a riding stable in for at least 25,000 square feet? That's about how big they are.
Do you think they
Yeah, oh,
are?
absolutely. You put a ring, yes, and you have stalls around the outside, absolutely. You can only have 10 animals, but you can have, your arena. Yeah,
The riding arena.
160
Riding for like
About-
housing, for housing.
It's about 160 by 160. That's 25.
1,000.
Yeah.
There's agricultural standards of how many cows should be on certain acreage, how many chickens or whatever.
Right, eat regardless of the district.
So we
yeah.
can't determine that. There's
Right.
already rules for that.
I think, that's
So
fine.
if
I think-
somebody's going to put a 1,000-foot building up, they evidently have checked with the agricultural if they're allowed to put that many chickens in one place.
I think the setbacks are a protection. I wonder about the size of the building, but I mean, yeah, I think the setbacks are the protection.
The only thing about your setbacks, what I'm concerned, like I said, is if you have narrow, if somebody subdivides lots and they're 10 acres, they're usually narrow and long, if you have property like
Well,
that.
that's why we
Well,
have the
that's-
exception. So
well,
I did
that's-
have an exception in there, like
And it's,
if you
right,
can't
that's something that would
accommodate.
have to be, and then you get other people wanting to do the same thing, using that parcel maybe somewhere else. I mean, the setback. So well, if you do it here, why can't you do it over here?
Well, there's a lot of townships that for a 10-acre parcel or less, they have much more restrictive ordinances for the number of animals that you can have on there and where you can put them. It's really not considered a
Well,
farm.
Back in the early 2000s, when they did that for horses and stuff like that, because they were having so many complaints with people having a couple acres and
Yeah.
having 10 horses on a couple acres.
Yeah.
That's where some of that come up and be questioned in your,
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
curious about that,
Yeah.
like why only?
And I think
horses?
you'll see that if you have 10-acre parcels, that is a big conflict with how many animals can you have there when your side yard might not be that wide and you have neighbors right beside you. It's,
I think
Right,
we've
Wayne?
done enough.
Okay, let her talk once. Again, you have to, I'm not sure your first name, I don't know. Kathy, two
So-
Kathys in here, okay.
So, I brought up the issue of conditional use and permitted use, and my thought on it is this. I understand in the agricultural area, structures, I mean, a farm is a farm, you need a barn, you need something like that. I understand your argument with that. And I get that in the ag area. So permitted use for these structures with setbacks. But I think when you're talking about any area that has anything outside of agricultural, it should not be allowed to have, you should not just have the permitted use for buildings, for structures, for animals, because you have a dual purpose in that zone. Residential, the purpose is residential. And I understand that you allow ag in the residential, but if you have a home, that's your purpose, that's your primary principal use. And yes, if you want to have some animals and you have that 10 acre that allows it, I feel like you should still go through a process where it's permitted, where it's conditioned, so that a hearing or some capacity to let the neighbors come in and weigh in and have part of the decision made with them in mind, as opposed to just saying, it's permitted use and I can put the structure up the size I want, whatever. I feel like you need to have some other kind of buffer in those areas that are not agriculture. In agricultural, that's different. It's permitted use. We understand that. It's ag. You have animals, you need a barn. It's a structure. You need that. But when you step outside of the agricultural zone, I don't think you should have permitted use for these structures, even if you do have good setbacks. Because, again, you're giving that green light and your neighbors don't have any say involved, or the community, for that matter, doesn't have any say involved. So that's where I think the suggestion of making this two different things, with the conditional use being necessary in things outside of the ag, permitted use, we get it. You need a structure in the ag area. That can stay as is and, have the setbacks that you suggest.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
I'd like to, anybody here would be in my situation, I'll bet you'd do the same thing I'm doing. This right here, it's August 1st, 2022. This is what him and Gary Fauner, George Proch, they got their head together.
Mr. Chair, please.
He runs this whole place. He runs the supervisors. He had Mary Jo. He put those three guys. They voted, and now they let that contractor do whatever he wants. It was like 30 days. He gave him 5-6 years. That's not right. If he'd follow the ordinances instead of just screwing everybody, especially me, it gets way too much.
Thanks, Wayne. All right, anybody have any other comments? Motion for adjournment? Second?
Who motioned?
Kathy, okay. I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.
What happened with this?
What's it?
What happened with
They're not here. They didn't do their stuff.
Oh, yeah, neither one of those done. They're not ready yet.
Dave, hey, flick that switch off on me.
So there was no motion